all kinds of industries about the intersection of people and machines and how we get things done. Today we have Philippe. He's going to come here and talk to us about the work he does and the people that he worked with. So Philippe, welcome aboard. Tell
Thank
us,
you, Peter. It's a pleasure being on your podcast.
thank you. Tell us like, you know, who you are and what you do, and where you feel you fit in the puzzle of human life. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have been in Silicon Valley for 36 years, and I have witnessed a lot of changes in technology. The internet wasn't existing really when I came here. Uh, I had an email address because I came from the scientific background, and people were like, well, "What is this thing that you have on your business card?" Um, but I'm actually really an entrepreneur at heart. I like to convert ideas and typically crazy ideas into real businesses, real products or services that people transact and buy. And it's that process that I'm really excited about. I've done this several times, sometimes, being lucky and successful, and many times failing. And I always like to say, I play tennis and I tell people I never lose. And they're like, "Are you Federer?" I said, "No, I never lose because I'm always learning." And I think that's really the journey that's exciting. Um, I work for very large companies like Hachette, one of the largest publishing companies in the world. I worked at Apple. I actually had the privilege to work for Steve Jobs directly, and that's how I lost my hair, in case anybody wonders. But it was a really interesting experience, and I learned a lot. I went to the dark side. I became a venture capitalist, and I was a partner in a $500 million fund. I'm actually now recovering, just to be clear. But I decided to spend the last 10 years helping CEOs and founders to solve what I think is the biggest problem that they all face. And that problem is, what do I do on Monday morning at 8 o'clock to grow my business? And it's a very, very simple question. It's a bit like saying, what do I do, to be a good dad or a good mother? And it's like you don't really know where to start. And so I had this epiphany a few years ago where I realized that if you want to grow your business as fast as you can within your target market, then it's fundamentally a problem of alignment. You have to align your business with your target market. And then I realized there are four universal axes of alignment between any business and their target market. And we started to quantify that, and we actually measure coefficients of alignments from 0 to 100%. And we've been refining this methodology over the past 10 years, and very successfully deployed it in hundreds of projects. Um, and that's really what I'm excited about. We can solve a fundamental, really hard problem that every CEO that I know is facing. And that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, the alignment problem is real because like sometimes I come in strictly in the technical like implementation side,
Mhm.
and the user story is such a long journey to that point of where you're at the user story that's like the if statement is
Right.
what it's causing the complexity, right? And you're like, well, we want to make money, but we want to make money in the state of Washington and in the city of Seattle, and
Right.
if it involves 5 or 6 people, and some of those and ifs are like self-imposed or caused by your
That's
stack and all that. How do you kind of like break people free of this thinking? Because sometimes the 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 problem is so far back of the line to truly change it. You have to like go to the root of the problem.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the problem is what I call the pruning process, which is it's very easy to add stuff, right? I'm going to add a feature, I'm going to add a new distribution channel, I'm going to add a new component to our lead gen engine, those kinds of things. What I think is more interesting and what's really hard is to actually decide to not do something. And when I work with Steve, I can tell you that Steve was the most focusedly intense person I've ever met. I have never met somebody so focused. And I've been in meetings with him where we're talking about, 8 things, and he would like, okay, guys, I'm gonna go back in like 30 minutes, and you need to only show me 3 things. I don't care about the 5 other things. We cannot have 8 things. And I think the and if that you're talking about is because people are adding all those things, right? They're adding constraints, they are opening the aperture in terms of options that they want, and they have to do the exact opposite. I think they have to make one bet on one thing that is really really well understood, and if it works, then they can start thinking about the next step. And if it doesn't work, then they need to make another bet, and that has to be sequential. They cannot do that in parallel. I think that's the only way to build a successful business.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's not easy. It's very easy for me to say that, but it's not easy to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the Occam's razor of business is like, yeah, it would be great if I had a knife that could cut anything, or you
Exactly.
know, and sometimes like the features are like making up for deficits in the previous feature,
Hmm.
and so and no one's ever like got fired from a job for shipping the thing they shipped last quarter that got them a promotion.
Yeah.
So I think like it has to start internally with the culture of the company where it's just like, okay, we're at blackjack table in Vegas and we've won money. What do we do with the money we've won and sustain our growth so we can keep playing at the table?
Yeah.
Um, and that's it's challenging, especially if you don't have the culture where you reward people. Like if Steve Jobs came back and you still had five things and you had a good reason for those five things, would that
I would
pass
be
muster?
fired. I'd be fired. I mean, for sure, because he always have three things. I mean, I ran the e-commerce business at Apple. When Steve came back, when we bought Next back in '97, he was like, "Okay, we have the Think Different campaign. That was the big marketing campaign to restart Apple. Beautiful campaign. He had the iMac that was already in development and production, and then he had the e-commerce initiative, which is what I was doing, and that's it. Those are the three things he was focused on, and that was his obsession, and that's what he was doing, and he succeeded in launching those three things very successfully, I would argue.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I think I remember the day where I realized that Apple is no longer a jobs company when I found a tool that was a different way of doing things than another tool did it.
Mhm.
I think that is a profoundly an anti-Jobsian
Yeah,
position to have more than one method in the ecosystem that does a thing.
yeah.
And I think that is what kind of adds the is what it is mentality of the company when you have 19 ways to skin a cat versus like, and then you're arguing about which one's the better way when you're not getting past that problem set into the next problem.
Yeah, and then
Um,
you're spreading the budget and the talent across those 19 initiatives instead of putting everything in one and believing in that one and being successful in that one. I mean, the iPhone killed the iPod. That wasn't a problem for Steve Jobs. It's like,
right.
fine. He wasn't trying to keep the iPod alive because, again, that's what I'm saying about being sequential. You don't want to keep those things in parallel. But it's very hard because it forces you to really think hard about who you are, why you exist, why would somebody buy your product, why are you not better than your competition, but why are you different and in what way? And all those questions are fundamental. And I think that it's very easy for entrepreneurs to get busy and forget about thinking really hard about those questions.
Mm. And say you get through to people that you work with and you change the culture and they're able to unlock a hidden level of their ability to execute faster and expand the horizon. What do you think is the very next thing you should do once you've facilitated this rebirth of the process in a company?
I think once you have the rebirth or the redefinition or reframing, if you will, of the business, then it's a focus on execution, right? So there should never be a discussion about, what feature do we need to add or what's the customer, what's the person segmentation for our market. There should be a discussion about, okay, the plan was to deliver this on Friday. Did we deliver or not? And if not, why? And what are we going to do about it? It's really moving from a philosophical strategy positioning discussion to a pure execution discussion, and that's a different motion, if you will, in the company. And I always ask CEO, I said, are you in execution mode or are you in strategy mode? But you cannot be in both of them at the same time.
Mm,
You really, and again, it's all about this notion of being sequential. And the temptation is always like, I'm working on a product right now at Blue Dots, and we have people that come with ideas on features, and we say the V1.0 has been frozen, 2 months ago. Those are good ideas. Put in, we call that the icebox. put that in the icebox, and when we're ready to think about the version 1.5 or 2.0, then we're going to resuscitate those ideas and we'll debate them. But right now, I don't really want to hear about. Just keep memorialize them somewhere.
Hmm.
But that takes, and that's it. I spend 30 seconds and I don't even start to debate or think about whether they are good ideas or not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You have the two separations because in my business, I also kind of say that like the execution stage is like reading the newspaper, and the envisioning stage is like doing a book report, right?
Hmm.
And you need to have a different posture for both.
Yeah, yeah,
And the problem of a lot of like these vibe coding and AI platforms is actually less insightful to things like agile code development and stuff like that, where you don't
yeah,
understand how the sausage is being made, so you don't see the opportunities because the brain can see things the computer can't. It's like, oh, that's horribly inefficient, or that's dumb that we do that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what do you see a lot of pushback now that people are using these technologies that are like, okay, I can launch a product, I can do a sprint in a day, and I can do a release in a week. Um, let's take the time and do 5 releases a month versus keep the same cadence and just do more fidelity and higher quality 1.0s.
Yeah, I think again it's a really good question. We are big fans of vibe coding and using Claude and other code generation, AI generation. In fact, we're just developing a product that has 80,000 lines of codes, and we didn't write one single of those lines. The advantage of AI is that it writes better and faster code, but to me, the biggest advantage is you can iterate very, very quickly. So we have things where we envision a feature in our head, we think it's a good idea, we have a good UI and UX navigation, and then we implement that within 2 hours with Claude, and we look at it and say, this that just doesn't work. And because they expose an experience that we could not imagine. Then the other big advantage is finding bugs. It's really good at debugging, and sometimes it finds bugs where we never saw the bug, and then we reproduce after it eliminates that bugs. We try it, and indeed it is a bug, and not only that, but then they fix it. And so I think the compression time to build a product, a software product, is a tremendous success. But again, it's go back to the same thing that we've been discussing, which is what prompts, right? What is the framework? What are you asking the system to do? And that's where the thinking needs to go ahead. The system is not going to build, is not going to invent a product for you. But the velocity at which you can iterate is really interesting because you can try different ideas very, very quickly. You don't have to spend a lot of time and resources. And so you can converge to the final product in a much, much faster pace that I've never seen before. I think that's the advantage.
And I think it also kind of exposes the lie of shipping as a KPI, right? Because
Yeah,
uh, it is no, if it's no longer expensive to ship a product, it still is expensive to ship a quality product or a thing
right.
that does what it's set out to do.
Yeah,
And and so things that became cut through for austerity measures like user testing and
right.
research and accessibility and all those things, I think those are the things that immediately you need to hydrate if you go into vibe coding world.
That's correct. And they're
Which
so important, and it's not sexy and it's not fun, but they are so critical. So I've always had a big issue with this, minimum product requirement thing. And I always said, okay, I am BMW. The minimum product I can ship is 4 wheels on a frame with a driving wheel and an engine that kinds of works. Am I going to ship this? It doesn't make any sense. Steve Jobs and Apple is exactly the opposite. We would go through length of testing, 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 refining the product, and sometimes we would ship 6 months, 12 months after after another company like Microsoft. I'm not against Microsoft, but would have shipped, and it was like, no, we're not going to ship this because there's still this pixel over there that's really not quite working.
Mhm.
And that's my background, that's my DNA. I don't like this idea of shipping fast and fixing. I think the company should fix, not the customers and not the prospects.
And I think you know, I'm no longer associated with Apple and you're not associated with Apple, but I think, people drag them for their slowness in the AI race. And I think it's because they're still design-driven organization who refuses to put something out that is for entertainment value only, like
That's
Microsoft.
correct. And at the end of the day, I would bet that they're gonna win that war. I think they're gonna Look at how long it took them to do a MacBook, the Neo, that's much cheaper than any PC today. I mean, years and years. But now it's like people wake up like Dell and those companies are like, oh my gosh, how do we compete against that? It's beautiful, beautiful product, by the way.
Yeah, I think the Neo is amazing because it's just like one. I no longer even want to see a Chromebook. you know,
Right, exactly. Once you
you
touch
know,
that,
and the other thing is like a even a MacBook Neo is enough to do most AI tasks
that's right,
in a way that should make ChatGPT and Anthropic quake in their boots.
for
And I
sure.
think Apple's playing a long game of when the price of these things come down, people aren't going to want to like AI only works when it has intimate knowledge of everything about you and everything you know. And I don't want that living in Microsoft's cloud or
Right.
Anthropic's cloud.
Or Google, right.
And Apple has no interest in my iCloud data in a way that almost no cloud provider does. And
Yeah,
so that
it's very
is to
true.
me like the long-term winning strategy of these things where it's just like, yeah, we're going to help you and we're not data miners and we're not ad tech company. We're not going
Yeah,
to like
we're not
steal your
conflicted.
IDs.
I had a guy the other day who told me, well, Apple lost the AI war. I said, the war ain't over,
what
I
I
said,
mean,
let's talk 2 years from now and we'll see.
yeah, like we build internal tooling and we all use MacBooks at work and we use Apple foundation models that aren't out
Mhm,
yet, but they're available in the community.
mhm.
We're saving 89% on compute from the
I'm
cloud.
sure. I'm
And
sure.
so the minute that becomes available for mom and pops of the world, I think they're cooked. Like you can't spend $12 billion a quarter on
For
compute
sure.
and win.
That's very
Um, and Apple has 5 years of RAM and hard drives locked up. I think they'll survive this winter. Um, we got a couple minutes left. Before we go, what are you think if people are just checking you out? Where should they look for more information about you and your company?
Yeah, I think the best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. They can do a search on my name, Philippe Bouissou. Um, the other thing they can do is they can check out our website, which is bluedotspartners.com with an S at the end of dot and an S at the end of partners. And then they can have a sense of how we help company grow faster. I wrote a book called Aligning the Dots, which is really a good also summary of what we do. And I gave a TED talk actually, so I was able to condense this concept of alignment in 16 minutes. The TED talk got over 1 million views, which for a business talk is quite unusual. But that I think is a good way to listen to it and get an introduction to what we do. So those are the way to contact me and to connect with us.
Cool. And we'll post the links to all that when we upload the stuff and post it in stream channels. Philippe, last thing before we go, what are you most excited about in your life right now? It doesn't have to be about tech or culture. What it gets you kind of energized and ready to start the day?
I think it's and it's gonna sound very bizarre to a lot of people who are gonna listen to this. We're in a very weird, bizarre world right now, I believe. And what I'm excited about, and maybe I'm naive and I would accept that critique, is that I think that gives us the opportunity, particularly in this country, in the US, gives us the opportunity to kind of redefine who we are and actually become a better country in a way. And so I'm very optimistic, as painful as the situation is, and it is painful and it is global, which is worrisome for sure. But I think, this country, if you study the history of this country, we go through ups and downs. And every time we go through a down, the up that follows it is much, much higher or a much better country. And so that's what I'm excited about. And again, I'm optimistic. The other thing I would say is AI is really remarkable. I have never seen anything like this. I've been here for 36 years. I was talking to Steve Wozniak the other day, who told me that this is much bigger than the PC and the Mac and the iPhone and the internet. Um, and he's right. And the other thing that he was telling me, which I thought was very insightful, he was saying that AI works really, really well, but we don't quite understand why. And he's very unsettled by that. And I totally agree. So we're developing AI product. We call that the CEO Plus, which is a decision partner, an AI decision partner for CEOs, where they can ask very personal, difficult questions about the business and decisions they need to make that they cannot really discuss with their boards, they cannot discuss with their executive team, they cannot discuss with their wives or their husbands because they don't really understand. And that tool, that AI decision partner tool, is in their pocket 7 by 24. It is totally secured. So we build a contextual engine very specific to the company, but highly secured. And ultimately, CMOs and CFOs and everybody in the organization is our vision that should have a decision partner in their pocket and help them challenge their thinking and come with a different perspective. And that's the product we're building, and we're quite excited about this.
Yeah, I really think that's the next stage is like, what is the personal cloud and what is the personal brain? And
Yeah,
then what is distribution from brain to brain, right?
right.
And so like if right now we're kind of in the IBM BIOS era of AI, and what do we
Hmm.
get into the IBM compatible
Yeah,
BIOS thing?
then it
We're,
explode.
that's kind
Yeah,
of the thing that we're waiting to happen. So
yeah.
uh,
But I would say that the challenge with AI, in my opinion, is three things. One is, the notion of memory. Where does the memory reside? Then the second one is the contextual engine. What context do you need to provide to the engine, to the AI engine, to the
mhm,
LLM, so that it can give you really the right answer that are pertinent and that are aligned? If you go on ChatGPT and say, well, my co-founder, we started a company 5 years ago, he needs to go, I need to fire him. How am I going to do that? Well, ChatGPT will give you a very generic answer, and there's nothing
mhm,
wrong with that. But if now I know, that your co-founder happens to be your brother, that he invested, 49% of the company, he put $2 million, and he's
right.
the CTO, then my answer will be very different. So that contextual engine is really critical. And then the third component is security. If I'm going to upload my board deck or my strategic plan or my financial, I don't really want, to upload that into any LLMs. I don't want them to train on these. And we build this CEO plus product solving those three problems, which we thought are really fundamental to the trust that we need to establish with CEOs. And it's not easy. It took us over a year, and I thought naively, oh, we can do that in 6 months, but boy, was I wrong. It's a lot more complicated than I thought. And I
Yeah.
actually think naivety is critical to fuel the entrepreneurial engine, right? You have to be naive. I look back at what I've done, and if I had known what I knew after, like I would probably have never done it. So
Well, I mean, that's why they call it disillusionment, right?
yeah,
Because,
exactly.
and I think, yeah, to me, hallucinations are primary a function of governance failures, right?
Correct.
And so, like, if you are able to say things that are untrue or things that are generic or not applicable, it's because your model is so unbounded that it's able to like consider things that aren't true,
Yeah,
right?
no, that's very true. And in fact, the bigger the contextual engine, the more hallucination you observe.
And I think also, it's like a context fidelity thing, right? Because
Yeah,
like, should I wear a hat today? Is it raining or not, right?
right.
Should I wear a hat because it's culturally insensitive to the event? Is like a whole lens of things,
Yeah,
And I think when we talk about ethics and bias, we're really talking about more and more dimensionality.
yeah, yeah,
And I think the failure of companies when we talked this earlier about like the roadmap. And I think the roadmap is like where you're putting unnatural constraints on the idea that
yeah,
have to be fulfilled.
yeah.
So,
Those are the end ifs you were talking about earlier.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So, well, it's just so much to think about. So, and I'm
I
reading
know.
your book, by the way. I love your book. It's so good.
Thank you.
Um, Everyone should check it out. And we'll post a link to the book in the chat. And Philippe, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. It's always really a pleasure to talk to you, and I really enjoyed your conversation. And your questions are so thoughtful. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're also in the same space you are in terms of the tooling we make for ourselves,
Yeah,
and we're thinking about how to apply that to other people because yeah, I think doing AI right and doing AI wrong is something that is artificial constraint of the tooling of our era, and I think
hmm,
people know how to do things right and wrong if the technology would let them do it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
hopefully both of us can win in our spaces and get this going forward. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.